Hope you guys are doing well. Thank you for coming. Beautiful city, Istanbul. So I'm going to talk about building benevolent systems today. Super hard problem. You're trying to align all these competing incentives. So let's give some context. Most blockchains are public ledgers. There are private blockchains like Monero, Secret Network once upon a time, but most of the time these blockchains are public networks. So with that means all user transactions are public to anyone that snoops on the chain. If you think about the transaction supply chain, conceptually it's a supply chain. It starts at a user creating the transaction, sending it over to an RPC, and then the RPC from there to the validator can touch many different points. Between the transaction getting created and landing on chain, many things can happen. That transaction could get leaked to someone malicious that exploits the user. And that's just the state of the world today. We've transitioned from these public mempools to mempool-less blockchains like Solana is today. Bitcoin was the first blockchain, had a mempool, then it was Ethereum, had its own mempool. A mempool is really just a list of transactions that's public to the entire network. Solana is mempool-less in the sense that a transaction goes straight to the leader into the block. Yeah, and an MEV basically emerges out of these systems. Wherever there is an opportunity for anyone to make money, you should assume that that's going to happen. And as we're building the systems, we should keep that in mind and not trust any parties in the chain. So, yeah, MEV, as I alluded to earlier in the talk, it's not really a negative thing. It's just a thing that exists. So embrace it and try to just give users better pricing and a better experience. So we're going from MEV to REV now. REV is a term that was coined, I don't know by who, but in the past few months, stands for real economic value. So MEV is kind of like the potential value that you can get from reordering transactions within a block. REV is the actual value that you get from reordering those transactions. You imagine like what that actually means in practice is like you have two users trying to compete for a trade. Let's say the price of Sol is higher on Coinbase, lower on Solana, on some DEX. So there's an arbitrage opportunity. So users are going to compete for that opportunity up to whatever the profitability is through bidding. Jito has built a system where users are able to do this bidding off-chain through our block engine. And from that, you get REV. So we should not spend any energy trying to get rid of MEV. It's definitionally impossible. Let's reframe it to something more positive and forward-looking. Let's give users better pricing. At the end of the day, the main application on blockchains is trading. You see other things pop up like social media and other sorts of apps, but really like trading is the core of what we're doing here. So we should optimize for that application. Yeah, and so not only is giving users better pricing a big goal of ours, but it's also make the network valuable for validators. So Jito made $1 billion for the network in the past year, which is a huge amount. You see Jito fees are much higher than priority fees, even though Jito only accounts for 20% of the block. And what that does, it makes the network more attractive for validators to run because now they can run a node profitable. Validators have bills. They have server bills. They have voting transaction bills because of the way Solana consensus works. So by giving them this incremental stream of revenue, we've now attracted more people to come to Solana, which has this like reflexive cycle of more users wanting to trade on Solana. There's more volume on Solana. There's more market makers that move over to Solana. And overall, it's a net positive for the network. But there are some pitfalls to it. So before Jito existed, Solana was this mempool-less blockchain. It had this very shitty transaction scheduler. It was non-deterministic. And the Solana core devs are very good engineers. It's just really hard to get right the first time. I think the one issue is that when you're trying to roll out large changes to a blockchain like Solana, you have to like coordinate the release across the entire network, which is not easy to do. By having a dedicated team like Jito, dedicated to this specific part of the pipeline. It's easy to iterate, make changes, see if it works, and try again. We don't have to release to the entire network. We just release to our own nodes. There's also, Solana was prone to these DOS attacks like UDP flooding. We saw an entire data center get brought down long ago, 2 years ago. So we saw an opportunity here to basically improve the network. The idea was that Jito could essentially act as a Cloudflare around Solana by absorbing all this terrible traffic and then feeding validators a stream of clean and profitable transactions and bundles. We added a mempool. I talked about this earlier. So we added a mempool. What a mempool really is it's like a staging area for transactions. They're not actually landing on chain. They're just transactions that haven't landed yet. They're pre-flight. And we would stream this mempool out to searchers. And the idea was that searchers would then backrun transactions and increase revenue for everyone involved. There's an interesting feature about Jito bundles, revert protection specifically. So what that leads to is actually higher fees. So I mentioned earlier that Jito fees are much higher than priority fees for validator. That's because of this revert protection. Basically, if your bundle fails, you don't pay any fees. It just gets dropped. If your normal transaction fails, you pay the priority fee still. So if you have the ability to make $10,000 on a trade, through Jito, you'll probably bid up to 90% of that. So let's say you bid $9,000 because it's basically a risk-free $1,000 spread. Through normal transactions, you're not necessarily willing to pay $9,000 in priority fees because if your thing fails, then you pay $9,000 for a failed transaction. So this is great for searchers, traders, and validators. But where does that leave our users, which are also very important to the health of the network? This is an overview of what the system looks like today. You have on the left customers, which could be dApps like Jupiter, flow aggregators, which are basically sort of like they take all these, they're like RPCs basically, and they promise their users to land transactions fast for them, but they're really like wrappers around Jito. And then you have HFT firms like Argonia who use Jito to have deterministic transaction landing. So transaction can go directly to the block engine and then straight into Solana, or they could go through the relay and then into Solana. At the relay, they are held for about 200 milliseconds. The idea behind this delay was that if you insert an artificial speed bump, you buy some time and you're able to aggregate transactions for 200 milliseconds and then really see, like a very exaggerated example of this is, let's say I give you a year to produce me the best block. You could produce me a much more profitable block if you had a year versus if I told you have a day. So the idea behind the relay is, all right, we'll just let transactions accumulate for 200 milliseconds, and then we have enough time to really like build a more profitable block. There's trade-offs, right? You're trading off latency for value. So down goes the mempool. This was very controversial. It was a fun time. It was like at the height of there's great engagement on the tweet you see. It was at the height of things, and we just shut it off. The idea was we don't want to be responsible for users getting sandwiched, and also it was really hard to maintain the infrastructure for it. So we're back to mempool lists, but really there's private mempools that exist today. So the mempool is down. The problem's not really solved. We have this rise of private mempools. The dark forest has gotten darker, but your stake does have the potential to mitigate these problems. I think stake pools have some power here too. If you can properly label validators that are leaking transactions, then you can start moving stake off of them and thus disincentivize them from doing this. So where we are today, there's some good things and bad things. It's not all bad, right? Solana's doing great. Solana's the best fucking chain out there. It's got the most volume. All the users are on Solana, but there are a fair amount of users getting subpar pricing. Some of them don't really care, but we should care. The Solana scheduler is doing much better than it was doing once before. The Jito's auction scheduler is doing much better than it was. It was really just software with a ton of bugs that eventually got resolved, and now things are looking much better. And like I said earlier, validators made $1 billion in the past year. They're on schedule to make that and more. If you look out 10 years, I believe this number is going to be 10 to 20x that. So all in all, net positive so far. So we launched Jito far left. You don't even see any bars. We were basically making 0 tips. And then you look at this. This is showing validator tips from Jito. So like the highest is around 100K SOL in a day for validators. So 100K SOL is a lot of money. So congrats if you're running a validator. And then this is what I was talking about earlier. The blue is Jito tips, and the black is just priority fees. So Jito tips is like consistently higher. There's a point right there where you see the priority fees are much higher. That was a bug that I may or may not have deployed. We fixed it, and tips are consistently 1.5x higher. This is due to the revert protection. So users feel safe just tipping very high. So why is it so hard to build systems that makes everyone happy? Well, you have all these different parties. They all have competing incentives and competing needs. Users mostly care about landing, right? They just want good user experience. Some care about getting better pricing, like HFT firms, market makers, and more sophisticated users. Long tail traders don't really care. They just they're already taking a risk on a volatile asset. They just want to get in really fast. Validators need to pay their bills, but they hold SOL too. And they need to attract staked. Searchers just want to make money. I love searchers, but they don't necessarily hold SOL. This is important to note because things that are bad for the network will hurt the price of SOL. So if you're not holding any SOL, or you don't need to hold any SOL, like a searcher, then you don't necessarily have the incentive to really care about the network and what it does to the price. Validators care, right? Because they've put up all this CapEx to like spin up infrastructure to run nodes on Solana. I mean, searchers to an extent too. So it's in our best interest to really make Solana a good place for everyone to trade, and be long-term healthy. Yeah, basically, this is probably not a good analogy, or not an analogy that my lawyers would like, but think about Solana like this giant casino. If everybody in the casino loses all their money playing blackjack because the dealer was too good, then nobody else is going to play at your casino. Solana's not a casino, it's a proper system. But you don't want your users to all get rinsed of their money and move elsewhere, because then if we don't have any users, we're like Ethereum, basically. Yeah, so we can't really rely on goodwill and faith on the internet. We have to build like systems that are proven to be cryptographically better for users. So let's benevolentize it. You do that with transaction privacy. We've been spending a lot of time researching and building something in this realm, transaction privacy. Basically, I can't say much right now, but I can say that there's a future where users can basically trade on Solana without getting their data leaked. We need fast transaction inclusion. If you reduce latency of landing, you reduce a lot of the negative externalities. And we just need a deterministic scheduler. All this is a work in progress. We'll never get to a perfect world, but I think these are the 3 things that will really get us a lot closer. Thank you, guys.